All right, I see people still jumping on, but out of respect for everyone's time, I've got 1 o'clock, so we'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jerry Quinn, and on behalf of AFAA New England, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors, Fire Command Systems, J&M Brown, Mammoth Fire Alarms, Norel Service Company, Siemens Smart Infrastructure, Space Age Electronics, and TC Life Safety. Thank you to all of our sponsors. One of the great things about today's topic is that it's a follow-up to questions we received during a previous webinar. So we're always interested in putting relevant content into these webinars, so please keep the ideas coming. So question came up regarding specs for new systems, continuing to call for communicators with POTS phone lines. I think we're probably all aware that due to reliability concerns, we have to move away from POTS, but they still keep coming up in specs and different requests and so forth. So in the interest of kind of trying to educate everybody, we put this session together. So there's a number of different technologies that are available to provide alternatives to POTS and master boxes and so forth. Paul Hoey has volunteered to talk to us today about one of those solutions. But before I turn it over to Paul, a couple of housekeeping items. So we'll be recording the session. So if you need to drop off and come back, you can go to the AFA New England website to view this session as well as past sessions. And feel free to pass the link along to others that may not have been able to join. You can also sign up for our April session while you're on the site. If you have any questions during the presentation, please stay muted, but you can use the chat feature. And if we have time, we'll take the questions at the end of the meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Hoey. Paul's a senior sales manager for NAPCO in New England. He has more than 45 years of diverse experience in the fire and security industry. He holds a registered system technician and contractor license in Massachusetts, and his background includes all service positions. In 1987, he began his sales career and designed, sold everything from residential to large commercial fire alarm projects. He also worked for Savoy Automation, where they designed automation software that integrates to fire control panels for lighting, heating, cooling, load centers, etc. Also on the board of CASIA, MSCA, and NEAC. Lives in Central Mass and covers all of New England. So, Paul, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for having me. We'll go through this pretty quick. Definitely, we've already had some great questions up front, and hopefully we can get all your questions answered today. Okay, so I'm thinking everyone on this call is aware what NFPA states, that tying to a phone line without written permission from an AHJ is prohibited. This is my contact information. I think we all feel this way today in New England. March is coming in like a lion. Hopefully it goes out like a lamb. That's my contact info if you need to get a hold of me. But before we talk about today's communication, I think we should start at the beginning. And that's right here in Boston in 1852. Think of it as the first master box, a little history. And it looks something like this. McCullough loops, which is what 2 pairs of copper wires going from the premise to a central station. It's been around since basically 1890. When I started, we were working these things out, and then it was direct connect.
Paul, excuse me. I don't think you're advancing your slides because I can kind of see it in the preview, but.
Oh, you can't see the slides?
Well, we see the slides, but I'm still on the first page. I don't know if everyone else is seeing the first page still.
You're not sharing the screen, I think. We're not seeing the slides.
Oh boy. Okay.
So I'm seeing the slides, Paul, but I'm seeing the slides Communicators in the 21st century. I think that's your first one. I think you want to be on slide 4 with the piece of equipment you're talking about.
Right. So you don't see that. Oh boy.
It might be that you're using a dual monitor and you're seeing the presentation page and we're not. You might have like a flip screens choice up near the top, possibly.
Tim, any suggestions?
What you could
You
do, Paul,
want-
is go out of presentation mode and just advance them manually one at a time, and we'll see we'll see if you're in presentation, that's probably a problem.
All right, do you see that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Let's try
Yes.
advancing them now.
Yeah, okay, I just advanced it. Do you see that?
No.
No?
We're still on slide 1.
Okay, so what's going on here?
Are you sharing your desktop instead of sharing a single screen?
Good question.
I think you got it now. You just got to go into the PowerPoint and do presentation.
Say that again?
They're showing in.
We see your PowerPoint screen now, and you got
You
your
do.
slide to your left. So now you just got to go into presentation and start doing the presentation. Then you'll advance the screen to slide 3.
Okay. Bear with me. I use Zoom religiously, minimum twice a day here, so this
Yep.
this is new to me.
So Paul, what happens, can you click on slide 2? Just go like to the second slide and
All right, you
click
see
on.
that? NAPCO
Yeah.
New England?
Why don't you just go through it that way? Yep.
You see
So
that?
You're on slide 2 now, so you could do it that way, but you can go to slideshow and do your slideshow.
Right. Do you see me flipping it back and forth?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the first master box system in the country was right here in Boston in 1852. You see that? And it
Now, we're
looks
still on the map of New England that's frigid.
Oh boy. Do you see that now?
There you go. Now we're on the master box.
All right. So we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Do you see that?
Yes. McCullough loops.
Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So McCullough circuits is when I started in '74. We were starting to rip those out, and then what we call direct connect. All of these required a minimum of a pair of copper wires or a single copper wire from the premise to the central station. And then the private radio systems came out in the early 80s. All of that met NFPA's requirements as sole path communication. They were all supervised. That's a picture of a McCullough. It looks like a ticker tape. That's actually sitting right here on my desk, believe it or not. The DAC was invented in 1972. DAC stands for Digital Alarm Communication Transmitter. What that introduced is we could tie to a POTS line, plain old telephone system. NFPA required we tie to 2 phone lines, but the big advantage then was that we were giving full data. The pull station on the southwest side was just pulled, and now the water flow is now running on the southwest side of the building, so on and so forth. Okay, but that required 2 phone lines, right? And minimum 1 test time per day, just depended on your HJ, how many times we could test it. One of the things that I used to see all the time is with 2 phone lines, they were supposed to come into 2 different locations of the building, but we all know most of them didn't meet that. But just giving you a history lesson of where we started and where we're at. So the evolution of POTS and basically voice over IP put the end to that. Mesh networks came out. I think most of you are aware of that. IP reporting, personally, I thought that was their nirvana, but their IP reporting has its own flaws. And now the terms that I want to get through to you today is sole path and dual path. And then some of you have already reached out to me about what this FirstNet cellular network's all about, and I'll get into the details of that as we go forward. So AES, based right out of Peabody, Mass, right here, has been around, and that is what we call a mesh network. You obviously, with the more neighbors you have on the network, the better your signal strength is. Okay, and I'm sure you're well aware of the cost up front. Personally, I thought IP reporting was the way to go. However, IT departments don't like opening up ports. We're well aware of that. And what does NFPA state? And I'll reiterate that later on, that you must have backup batteries, UPSs to that network for a minimum of 24 hours. Okay. Kind of the beginning of the end of POTS was when voice over IP was introduced in 95. And I think we're all well aware of the issues of trying to have our fire panels communicate on a VoIP line, as we call it. And Verizon will tell you right up front, don't monitor your fire alarm or your security system through a VoIP phone line. It's not going to work. It's not going to work, not 100%. And when NFPA stated this in 2013, you must have written permission from your local AHJ to tie to a phone line. So how do these radios work? And I use the term radio. I'm kind of a veteran in this field. Technically, it's a cell communicator, but what it does is it still ties to the fire panel would tie to the tip and ring of the radio, and we call it dial-up capture. We're capturing that information, taking it to our NOC, and from the NOC, we just simply pass it through to your central station, you the dealers, okay? You're not supposed to be seeing all that because it depends what central station I'm working with. I'll bring it up this way so that you can see that, right? Correct? Yes? No?
So we're seeing the radio reporting path on a white screen, not the present.
You see Soul Path?
No, yes, at the bottom of the page.
And you see me move my cursor right here?
No.
No. All right, so we'll do it this way. Can you see this now?
Yes.
All right. So any fire panel that communicates contact ID or 4.2 format, you simply tie to the tip and ring of the radio. We then go on the data side of the cell tower, not the voice side. If you've ever been, I always use the example, the northwest side of Lake Winnipesaukee, and it's like, what? I can't talk right now, but you can text. That's how these radios transmit to what we call a NOC, Network Operations Center. We are, think of us as a central station, but we are just simply a pass-through to your central station. And you can see I work with all the central stations, okay? So that term is called Soul Path. Please remember that, okay? Now, I'm already hearing this from certain jurisdictions where they want proof at that location of that radio that radio minimally hits 2 cell towers. So if you write this website down, cellmapper.net, you can look up the street location where that radio is being installed, and that'll tell you how many radios you have within that general vicinity, both Verizon or AT&T, okay? And we call it the dB level, and kind of like our golf scores, the lower the better. So we want a dB level of anything under 100, preferably. All right, and Soul Path per NFPA must check in once an hour. Now the second term I want you to know is what we call dual path. So again, we're tying to the tip and ring of any fire panel. We still go on the data side of the cell, but we also leave the premise IP. And we again go to the NOC, and then we simply pass it through to your central station. Okay? I don't know if I can make this bigger. All right. Now, dealers still, they've got the premise off the phone line, but are still dialing up from the NOC to the central station on their 800 number, or God forbid, their local phone number. What every central station is now stressing to us is they want you reporting to their IP receivers. You can see you can select SureGuard 234, there's SureGuard 5, there's Bosch 6100, so on and so forth. I don't want to get into all the details on that, but the whole key to this is that the processing is probably less than 10 seconds when you report IP to the central station versus using dial-up, which could take a minute or even over a minute, okay? And just like a central station, a NOC, Network Operations Center, has to have redundancy. So there is complete redundancy with the system. If there's a superstorm Sandy, for example, the other part of the country, they just flip a switch and they're operational, okay? Getting into some of the code requirements. Jerry, everyone on this call is from New England, correct?
Mostly, Paul.
Okay.
You can assume that for your comments.
All right,
Yep.
so I'm going to assume we're all here from New England. So what that means is every 6 states that I manage here in New England is we're all on 2013, which says NFPA says that sole path communicator must check in once an hour. If it's a dual path communicator, then you can back it off to a 6-hour check-in. Okay. Getting into the NFPA requirements, 2013, basically 13 through 19 are just almost identical as far as communication goes. I was up in Burlington a year and a half ago when you hosted with Dick Rue, the speaker, introducing 2016. But to my knowledge, I don't think Vermont adopted 2016. But as far as the communication goes, that's the identical to us. So single path shall be allowed. Obviously, some jurisdictions that's not possible, aka Rhode Island. But that sole path radio will check in once an hour. If there's a failure, then the central station will know. And you also need local enunciation. Most dealers just simply tie back to the fire panel to give that local enunciation, so on and so forth. Okay. Multiple paths, aka the dual path. So now we're going to go cell and IP, and you can see here we can back it off to 6 hours. Okay. Just to summarize, and this is 2016 plus international building codes, almost identical verbiage to what you just saw, but you can see here 2 phone lines that are not permitted do not meet requirements. Okay, so going forward, dealers, do not tie to phone lines. Okay, multiple paths again, we can go cell and IP. So we can back off the check-in times to your central station. Single technology, multiple paths, which is what some dealers do, where they'll use both a Verizon and an AT&T radio, giving them multiple paths. Okay. I'm sure most of us are aware of this, the 3G sunset, which will be gone by this time next year. AT&T refers to that as GSM, Global Systems Mobile. Verizon refers to that as CDMA, which stands for Code Division Multiple Access. That will also sunset next year. So you want to go forward with LTE, which stands for Long-Term Evolution. And both Verizon and AT&T are stating that will be good through 2030. Okay, kind of the evolution of, and you're seeing all the commercials about 5G ready and so on and so forth. And what has transpired? My first mobile phone was a bag phone. The flip phone was indestructible. I personally went through 3 Blackberries. The first time I could stream video on my Blackberry, so that's cool. And now the smartphones, and I call it the kiddies, are driving all this. They all want the bandwidth. They all want the 5G. Well, that's fine, but 5G isn't there yet. So up till now, if you drive down the highway, you see the cell towers that are out there. Personally, I thought the same thing. Verizon, AT&T, we're just going to go to these cell towers and rip out the old technology and put in the 5G. But 5G doesn't have the horsepower. So what they do is they got to put these micro cells on telephone poles, church steeples. You're going to see these going forward in a lot of places. They've got a lot of work to do in this next decade. They call it micro cells. So if you're drilling in, this looks a little better when I bring it up on the show, but you're drilling this in. Maybe if I close this, that'll help. Is that better?
Yes.
5G, if you
Shrink it
see
back.
here, better? Yes? Sorry about that. It all worked good in dress rehearsal. Only kidding. 5G, bottom line, doesn't have the penetration. As you can see there with the mid-range and the high range, you know, it hits the tree with the leaves, gets to the building's wall, but doesn't penetrate the building. So they've got to hang these microcells everywhere. They've got a lot of work to do. So going forward, no fire radio is 5G ready yet. You need to stay with LTE until further notice. It doesn't have, you know, it's bottom line, doesn't have the penetration right here. These aren't my words. This is from their websites. I extracted this information. So every